everyone, Ariel Adams here with the Superlative Podcast. Please listen to aBlogtoWatch's other podcast, aBlogtoWatch Weekly, where we talk about the latest watch news and reviews. Today on Superlative, my guest is Mike Margolis. He's the president of Czapek Americas. He also does distribution for a couple of brands, including Singer Reimagined. Mike, welcome.
Thank you very much, Ariel. It's great to be on with you.
I have to say, you probably should have been on earlier in the show's history, but I wanted to spend about 6 years refining the series to prepare it for you.
I'm glad you have the questions down cold. It's fine.
Yeah. No, it's important to say that there are people on this show who I've never met before, and I'm interviewing for the first time here. And there's other individuals who I have a lot of history with. I'm trying to think where you were working when I first encountered you, and I'm guessing it was probably at Hublot, right?
I think it was at Hublot, and I worked at Hublot from 2006 to 2011. So we could be 20 years, we could be 15 years, but in any case, we sure go back a long ways. I knew you before you were married, before you had kids.
Yeah.
We go back.
And after Hublot, you worked at Girard-Perregaux for a while, correct?
I did. When I left Hublot, very end of 2011, I left because I was offered a president's position. At Hublot, I was I'm trying to remember what my title was. Basically, I was the sales director. I was running US and Canada, not Caribbean, not Latin America. All by myself. We were doing $50 million a year. It was a ridiculous job, so much work, so much fun, but so much work. And when I left there, I was offered a president's position for Girard-Perregaux North America, which for me was so much more than sales. It was finance, it was legal, it was advertising. There was so much more to it. There's no way I could do what I do today without those few years that I was at GP. So it didn't last as long as I would have liked, but it was an amazing experience, and I'm glad for it.
I want to talk more about that time, but I also want to clarify what you do today. You work sort of in a similar capacity, but for smaller brands. You are essentially your own boss in a lot of ways, which I know that you prefer, which I prefer as well. But explain on a basic level what your day-to-day, week-to-week work is like, given your current roles.
Sure. So I have two major roles. I am the president of Czapek Americas Incorporated, and that's a brand new thing that just started 1st of 2026. Before that, since 2017, I was their agent. So Czapek hired my company to do importing, distribution, take care of repairs, advertising, social media, everything that a small company needs done, but they either can't afford or can't justify to hire a bunch of full-time people to do that job. So they hired my company, and I did everything for them. And the plan always was, from the very beginning, the plan was, when we grow the company, be big enough, we'll hire you to be the president, and you'll run the U.S. subsidiary. So that's the first thing I do, probably the main thing that I do. Since I think 2018, I've been an agent also for Singer Reimagined, which is a watch company based in Geneva that is an offshoot of Singer Vehicle Design, which is based in Los Angeles. And I still work with them as an agent. Again, they hire my company and I do distribution. So I still am self-employed, but I have a full-time job as well. So. And then I do some importing and distribution for a couple small companies who I don't sell for, but I help them move product around the U.S.
Now, I know that import, export, all that is kind of like a boring topic when you just hear the terms, but I think it's particularly important. And I want to talk a little bit about it because part of your specialty is just bringing these goods in the United States. And I think that that's not just important, but it can be difficult. Can you explain a little bit about why somebody special needs to be there to make sure that watches get in and out at the right price and the right way? Because I think it's super crucial, but especially small, young brands, they tend to gloss over it, not think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a specialty. It's something that I've learned over the years, and most brands have no idea what to do, especially if something goes sideways. They ship something FedEx and it doesn't have the right paperwork, or FedEx charges the wrong duty on it. I'm able to dispute those things. I have an import permit for it's called CITES. The French call it CITES, CITES. It's a Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species. And so I'm allowed to import a crocodile strap. I'm allowed to import a mother of pearl dialed watch. And if you just ship those things into the US without the proper import permit, they're going to get rejected and sent back to the sender. So there is quite an art to getting boxes in a timely manner.
Today, that seems more important than ever, because for the longest time, there was the matter of bringing it at a wholesale rate. So there was different types of tax structure. As you said, if there was an animal element, like a strap or something like that, there's the CITES complexity. Now there's tariffs, there's confusions over a number of things, there's all kinds of issues. Has the job of bringing watches in the United States become fundamentally more complicated, or does it just appear that way on the outside and it's kind of the same?
Oh, no, it's ridiculously more complicated than it was, let's say, 15 months ago when the first tariffs started in April of 2025. Yeah, it is so much more difficult. Just playing the tariff game, we started at 10, we went to 15, we went to 39, we went back to 10, and he threatened 15, but we never went to 15. Most people think it's 15 right now, and it's not, it's 10. And that's 10% of the invoice cost. But the U.S. government is very smart, and you're not wise to lie about the value of your watch that's coming in because you think you're going to pay less duty. Sometimes, honestly, it's just better. You're better off to buy the watch from an authorized retailer who's already dealt with all of that stuff than you are to think you're going to contact the maker in Switzerland and they're going to sell it to you in Swiss francs and you're going to make a ton of money or save a ton of money. And it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
I have to say something important on this. On a regular basis, I'm talking to small brands, as you are to a degree, who want to do better in the United States. As we know, the United States is the leading market right now, probably by a long shot, and will continue to be for a while given the geopolitical context. But they're sending watches like one at a time, usually from Switzerland to consumers. And I always ask them, I was like, what is your long-term or even short-term plan for having inventory in the United States so that when somebody here buys it, they not only get it without hassle, but Americans are not even accustomed to paying a tariff. You know, Europeans, and I think this is important to mention, most of them grew up paying VATs. We did not. So
Correct.
even if these are now, it's fair because the U.S. has to pay it as well. Okay, the U.S. consumer is not accustomed to that. U.S. consumer will do everything possible to avoid it. The difference between buying a watch which is already physically located in the United States and one that isn't already makes a huge difference. And when I ask brands about their plans, they just sort of like stare at me or have a silence. And that's amusing, right?
Yeah, it is amusing. I mean, aside from the sales part of it, opening up retailers or doing collectors events or whatever it is, the logistics side of it is amazing because if they ship one box from Switzerland to a client in Des Moines, Iowa, it's going to cost them about $250 in shipping and insurance to ship that watch in. And again, it can't have a crocodile strap. It can't have a mother of pearl dial. And if they wait and they send me a box that has 5 watches in it, it probably still costs the same $250, maybe it's $300 because there's a little extra weight and a little extra insurance. And then I'm going to take those boxes and I'm going to send them out to the 5 different clients all over the U.S. And they save a ton of money. So it's the logistics side of it is tricky. And there are plenty of freight forwarders out there, but I don't think there are many that do it specifically with watches. I don't deal with jewelry. I don't deal with anything else.
Do you find that customers sometimes have this shock? I mean, am I wrong that sometimes people will, as you said, attempt to buy, directly from the brand, sometimes innocently, because that's the only way to get the United States. And they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that it would take so long. I'd have to pay all these fees. Sometimes the brands are willing to compensate for some of those fees. Oftentimes they're not. I see this as being a huge issue. I don't know how big of an issue you see it as.
Yeah, it's definitely a big issue. There's no question about it. Like I said, the logistics side of, FedEx called me today on a repair that was coming back from Switzerland, and they had a question about it. And, a lot of these questions, if you don't know the right answer, it's going to be expensive. And I just want to go back to there's a couple of things I want to talk about. You mentioned VAT. Know that most countries in Europe run about a 20% VAT. VAT stands for value added tax, and it's basically like our sales tax. The only trick is you cannot avoid it. And here in the U.S., we can play some games and try and avoid sales tax, shipping to Delaware, which doesn't have sales tax or whatever. But you cannot avoid the VAT in Europe. So if you go to France and you buy a watch because Laurent Picciotto in Paris has the watch in stock, you're going to pay the price for the watch, and then you're going to pay 20, I don't know what France is, 21% VAT, 18%, and you have to pay that. And when you go to the airport to fly back to the U.S., you can do what they call a D-tax, which means you get most of that VAT back, which sounds great. But then there's some paperwork that follows you on the plane that most people don't know about. And when they close the door to the plane, the gate agent will hand the purser on the plane an envelope, and it has a bunch of things in it, including the people who de-taxed. And so when you land at JFK or San Francisco, wherever you land, U.S. Customs already knows that Ariel Adams de-taxed a watch in Geneva or Paris or wherever you are, and they're expecting you to declare that watch.
That's incredible. I guess I'll sum up by saying, and I want to hear if you agree or not, if you are an American, it's probably best to just buy a watch which is already in America, at least from a convenience and cost-saving perspective. Do I have that calculation wrong?
You do. I mean, again, you have to understand that we've got financial exchange, what we call FX, exchange rates to deal with. And it may look like you're going to save a few dollars when you price the watch in euros or Swiss francs and you compare it to the U.S. retail price. The thing is, the U.S. retail price already includes the tariff that's been paid by whoever it was that imported it. And the exchange rate, for the most part, you might save a little bit, but the hassle is, generally speaking, not worth it.
Okay, so you agree that it's best to buy in the United States if you can?
200%, yes.
Let's go back to Hublot, because Hublot was an interesting time. I think you were there basically until the LVMH transfer. Is that kind of how it was? Remind me what was like going on at the time, because I remember. I think it was around that time.
Yeah, I was there before that. When I started, Mr. Crocco and Mr. Biver owned the company.
Yeah.
So I started in 2006-ish. And the LVMH buyout was, I think, in 2009 or 10. I don't remember exactly, but I was definitely there for it.
Right.
But I tell people Jean-Claude Biver was my one and only boss. He was I was his direct report, and I answered only to him. I did have a president for a little while who I loved, but she didn't last either. But yeah, I was at Hublot when the Big Bang was announced, and the brand just took off like a rocket ship. Before the Big Bang, Hublot was a sleepy little company. I had owned one along the way, one of the ones that said MDM on it, Montre de Montre, the watch of watches. But once the Big Bang came, the brand just exploded. We went from, like I said, 5 million to 50 in about 6 years' time, just in the U.S.
I've had Jean-Claude Biver on this show and interviewed him a bunch of times, but what I think is interesting is the experience of what it was like to work for him. It was one thing to be spoken to by him or have a media relationship with him or be a collector, but working with him obviously was a different side of him. Talk a little bit about working for Jean-Claude Biver, especially in that era, which was sort of really the height of his, I want to say authority, right? People were sort of looking and admiring him really a lot at that time, and that lasted long into his time at LVMH. Again, talk a little bit about Jean-Claude Biver as a boss as well as a working colleague.
So that's a really cool question. He's one of the smartest people I know, one of the greatest marketers I know. I always say he's 90% genius and he's 10% lunatic. And some days it just swings the other way. The School of Biver is a really, really hard school. And when I meet somebody who worked for him for more than, let's say, 6 months, I know that they're a very smart and capable person because he won't stand for it. If you're not, he'll just fire you. So tremendous amount of work. I must have worked 80 or 100 hours a week when I was working for him. It just never stopped. He woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning and started his day, and he expected everybody else to. But you learn. He doesn't suffer fools, which I think is a great thing. But he's not an easy boss. There are days when you're like, why on earth am I doing this? I'll tell this story, and he would laugh if he heard it. Someday he probably will. I always say that he would wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and he would sort of survey his kingdom like the King of England. And he would say, who can I destroy today just for fun? And all of us who worked for him would wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go, please, God, don't let it be me today. Because there were days when he would just, like I said, it would go from this way to that way. And things got interesting.
Was it him just trying to be a motivator? Were these actual issues? Was he just being a rabble rouser? Explain what you think his managerial philosophy was in doing that.
He was all of those things. He like I said, he's a genius, but he's crazy. He's very smart. I'll give you one example, and my friend Richard Cornelia will laugh at this story. When I first started with him, he said to me, sent me an email, and he said to me, I think I was less than a week on the job. And he said to me, I would like your frank and honest opinion of Tourneau, please. Now, when I started with Hublot, I think we had 6 or 8 different Tourneau stores that we had Hublot in. And so, Ariel, you know me. If you ask me my frank and honest opinion, you're going to get it. Yeah. And so I sent him a letter back, and I said, these guys are terrible. Their salespeople last for 6 months. It could be a full-time job, my just running around to the Tourneau stores and training the salespeople, because you go back 6 months later and all those salespeople are gone, and there's a whole bunch of new salespeople that you have to train. And they're trying to sell a watch that they don't know anything about because last week they were selling Berluti shoes or something. And, I had to explain what the difference between a quartz watch and a mechanical watch was. And it was unbelievable. So, the free financing, that was, the big thing they did. So I said to him, these people are terrible. The best thing that they have is location. And I will say that Tourneau has always been in the very best location possible. You walk into South Coast Plaza, they're in an amazing location. You walk into King of Prussia in Pennsylvania, they're in an amazing location. And I think it's changed a lot since the Boucher guys have taken over. But so anyway, I answered him and I said, these guys are terrible. It's a full-time job just trying to get them from a number 1 to a number 3.
And you're right about all those things, by the way. You're not even, you're like, you were being nice.
So he takes my email and he forwards it to the vice president of sales of Tourneau, Richard Cornelia. And he says to Richard, this is what my new guy thinks of you. I'll teach him to learn how to work with you.
Interesting.
And you're like, this is your first week, and you're like, I quit a job to come do this, you know? And I mean, I have 50 stories like that. But at the same time, I have so many amazing stories. I learned so much from the man. I have so much respect for him. I'll tell you what, when I was offered the president's position at Girard-Perregaux after I'd been there for, I don't know, whatever it was, 5 or 6 years, I called him and I said to him, I've been offered this position. It's a lot more money. It's a lot more responsibility, but I owe my loyalty to you. And if you tell me don't take the job, I won't. And if you tell me, go ahead, Mike, then I'll take the job. And he said to me, it's a good opportunity for you. I think you should take it. And they hired 2 people to do my job when I left because one person couldn't do it.
Oh, yeah. I'll tell you a slightly similar story about Jean-Claude Biver. This is a number of years ago now, not 10 years ago, but close to that. And I was at his house having dinner with him, actually, which is, I understand, a rare invitation. And, you know, as a media person, I had noticed then, as I noticed today, that the landscape is shifting. What watch media is changing in a lot of ways. And I said to him, I said, Jean-Claude, you know, I have a lot of respect for you. I will listen to your opinion on this important matter. And the important matter is basically, what do I do with my future? He had seen the writing on the wall of what was going on with watch media and the ability for brands to invest in it. He saw that it was diminishing. He saw that there was a lot of changes. And despite him seeing that, he said, keep doing what you're doing, because good things that work will find their champions, will continue to work. And it was interesting because he's a master of pivots. He likes changing things. And so it actually was interesting to me that his advice, after he considered it, it wasn't one of his, you know, his really quick responses where he's got some snappy one-liner for something. This wasn't one of those things. You know, he spent his time considering the question. And I think it's very important that I gave a lot of credence to that answer. And I have, for the most part, continued to do in large part, especially in spirit, what I've always done, which is be an independent voice and try to use my own mind and emotions to guide how to cover this industry, rather than to sort of like follow the leader or do what the brands blindly want me to do. And like you, even if I don't necessarily agree with all of his methods, I definitely think that he has an intuition that can't be beat in the space. And that's very rare. And I think that those high intuition individuals, while they're rare today, have actually made the modern watch industry what it is.
Oh, I think so. I don't think our industry would be what it is today without Jean-Claude Biver and his resurrection of Blancpain in the late 80s. You know, his slogan that Blancpain has never made a quartz watch and they never will, that just flew in the face of every watch company who was trying to survive at that time by building quartz watches, from Patek to Omega and everybody else. And he was like, nope, we're not going to do that. We're going to build mechanical watches. And I really feel that saved our industry.
So what have you taken from Biver? Because Biver learned from Hayek Sr., and this is sort of how managers in this industry are made. There's no school for it. You basically have to work with or under or alongside one of these people who has this charisma and this intuition, and then you sort of adopt it in your own work. What parts of your decisions in your business do you say, you know what, I adopted that from Mr. Biver?
Well, the first thing I can think of is my respect for marketing, because ultimately, among all of his other traits, the man is a master marketer. And I think so many brands ignore that, or, you know, they think taking out an ad in the Wall Street Journal or a banner ad on somebody's website is marketing. And of course it is, but there's so much more to it. I remember, I'm going to go back a ways. F1 was owned by a guy named Bernie Eccleston.
Oh, yeah.
And Bernie had an Hublot watch. He was friends with Jean-Claude. And one day he was mugged for his watch. I don't know if you remember this. He got mugged
Oh,
for his
I know
watch.
the story. I love it.
He got mugged for his watch, and he had this huge black eye. And he took a picture of himself with this giant shiner, and he sent it to Jean-Claude. And Jean-Claude turns it into an advertising campaign. And the campaign was, "This is what they'll do to get an Hublot."
It was brilliant.
It was brilliant, but at the same time, it was very shocking. And I was with
But Bernie
him.
was in on it. That's the only thing that made it work, is that Bernie was in on it.
Bernie was in on it. And I mean, they ripped Bernie's wife's earrings out of her ears. It was a terrible situation. But Jean-Claude was with me. We were together in Miami when that ad hit. And so I'm driving and he's sitting next to me and his phone is just on fire. And he was the happiest guy in the world. And I'm like, I didn't really understand it because, I mean, this was a really tough campaign to show a picture of a guy who just got the crap beat out of him. And he said to me, "Mike, you don't understand." He goes, "Even bad publicity is amazing. Everywhere in the world right now, they're talking about our brand." And you can't buy that. You can't. I learned that from him. The other thing I learned from him, when I first started, he said to me, "I want to make a boutique on Madison Avenue in New York City." And so I go to a real estate agent and I'm walking up and down Madison Avenue, and I determined that there were only two blocks that I wanted to be on. It was Madison between 62nd and 64th. Hermes is there, Vacheron is there. I mean, it's like the perfect spot for a watch boutique. And we find a nice space, and the rent on it was like, this was 15 years ago, the rent was like $2 million a year. It was just ridiculous. And I do the math, and I come back to him. I said, "Jean-Claude, I'm a numbers guy. This just doesn't make sense. I mean, we can't sell enough watches to make this space pay for itself with the overhead we're going to have between, it's not just the rent, it's security, and it's, the build out. It was like a $5 million build out on that boutique because he hired Peter Marino, the architect." And he laughed at me and he said to me, "Mike, how much would it cost if we got a 1-story billboard on Madison Avenue that was 30 feet wide?" And I said, "I mean, first off, you couldn't do that. But if you could, I'm sure it would be $50,000 a month, $100,000 a month." And he laughs at me and he says, "Now let's take that billboard and put a door on it and let people walk inside and see our product." And you learn that some brands can afford that. Obviously, some brands can't. But the marketing is, I mean, that's what brings customers to the door. Sure, there's other things that brings customers to the door, but the marketing in general is what brings customer to the door. Somebody who's never heard of Hublot, and now Hublot must be, I don't know what they are, $250 million business worldwide. It's tremendous, and really that all started with him.
That's a really interesting story, and I think part of the lesson there is it's not whether you market, you have to market. It's not whether you have a big budget, you have to have a big budget. It's sort of the gall you have and how to spend it. But I want to compare and contrast it to a lot of the brands today who, rather than making bold marketing decisions, are deciding not to market at all and just focus on their watches. They're not really promoting the brands as much as they're sort of just promoting the product and trying to say, hey, there's celebrities wearing it. None of the marketing today, for the most part, there's some exceptions, feels like what Jean-Claude Biver would do. Talk a little bit about the problem there, because again, I know that it's an odd economic era. There isn't as much revenues coming in, but a lot of brands have made the decision to just effectively stop marketing and lean only into product and relationships. That again would defy some of the values and some of the performance that Jean-Claude Biver showed you what could happen. Are people wrong today, or is the era moved on? Is something missing about his type of leadership? Ironically, and I've written about this and I've been critical of him, he hasn't applied a lot of those lessons to his own Biver brand, right? So obviously there's an element of money, maybe spending other people's money, but I know I'm mixing a couple of things in here, but discuss this a little bit because I think it's very, very relevant.
Look, I think a small brand with a small budget is going to try and do small things. They're going to try and do Instagram and social media on their own. Maybe, they've got a 25-year-old kid who's a marketing intern, and she does a lot of TikTok or whatever it is. And so they think, oh, we'll give it to the intern and let her do our marketing campaign, because it doesn't cost anything, right? Versus hiring somebody. Well, I mean, the world has changed a lot since the Biver days. We were still doing, quarter page ads in the New York Times and Departures magazine. And I think print media is 99% dead today. I'm a dinosaur in my 60s, and I don't get one single magazine to the house. Not one. When I was a kid, my dad got National Geographic and Smithsonian, and there were always magazines in the house because that's how you
in the
learned
90s,
what was going on in the world.
15 subscriptions at a time. 15.
Yeah. and there's none now. I don't read anything in print. I'm a news junkie, but all my information comes from this 16-inch screen right in front of me right now. And so the landscape has changed, but the idea that you still have to find new clients. Let's look at Czapek. They make about 1,000 watches a year. We need 1,000 clients. Maybe we need 800 clients because 200 of them already own a watch or whatever, and so we don't have to explain the brand to them. But we've got to find new clients every day, every week, every month. And how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to do that with social media for sure, Instagram and Facebook. We have a Czapek owners group on Facebook and things like that, and those help. But the collectors events like the one you and I were at yesterday, the Red Bars, the Miami Watch Group, or whatever it is. They bring new people to the table. They bring people who are like, well, I've seen 500 pictures of a Czapek on Instagram, but I've never held one in my hands. And so those are the guys that we're looking for, and it's not easy to find them. Even the real watch aficionados. I don't think that, giving Timothy Chalamet, I don't even know how to say his last name, giving him a watch to wear, I don't think that brings buyers to the table. It sure doesn't for somebody like me. I couldn't care less what kind of watch Taylor Swift or Kim Kardashian wears. That's not going to attract me to a brand. And I'm sure there are people who will be attracted because famous people wear the watch, but I don't think that's the way to market it. For sure, Rolex probably does a good job because they have deeper pockets than anybody else with, their golf stars and their tennis pros and things like that. But I still wonder how many people sit at the U.S. Open and see that Coco Gauff is wearing a Rolex and go, I need to buy a Rolex.
Look, a lot of that is for the ego of the people working at the brands. You know that. They make these emotional decisions about where to spend. And
for sure.
They have what I call aspirational ambitions. They don't market to who is actually buying their watches. They market to who they hope was buying their watches. They market to the events that they like. It's good that they're spending emotionally at times, but it's also, they're not actually saying, how do we reach more people that are likely to buy our product? That's not always what's going on in their mind. Movado introduces the Heritage Kingmatic, a sleek timepiece that brings back the golden age of 20th century mechanical wristwatches when design and distinction were everything. The original Kingmatic was debuted in 1952 as a self-winding dress watch that remained in the Movado catalog for nearly 3 decades. The modern Heritage Kingmatic is directly inspired by a cushion-shaped Kingmatic design from 1962. Movado offers multiple cosmetic styles of the Heritage Kingmatic, each with a 35mm wide steel case, legible dial with beautiful Dauphine-style hands, and a Swiss-made automatic movement assembled at the company's manufacture in La Chaux-de-Fonds. Movado invites you to discover the Heritage Timepiece collection today as the company celebrates both the 70th anniversary of the original Kingmatic as well as the 145th anniversary of the historic Movado brand. Discover your next timepiece at Movado.com. I want to shift a little bit to help position your status in a very interesting category of individuals. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that you are amongst the first wave of what I call social American watch collectors. This group of individuals who, rather than just sort of like watches alone in a vacuum, decided to participate both online and in person in collectors groups. And you've been doing that for years. I think sort of probably for personal pleasure at first and then professionally. And you've identified the incredible power that exists from being able to find and motivate sales in these in-person contexts. So first of all, am I wrong in any of my assertions there?
No, you're not wrong at all. What I'll say is when I started, I fell in love with watches when I was in high school, before there was social media, before there was any of that. My father was a printer, and I never saw him wear a watch. But when I was in high school, I had one of those, it wasn't a pulsar because pulsars were too expensive, but I had an LED watch with the red numbers on it. And my watch broke one day, and I came home and I said to my dad, "Oh, my watch broken."
Oh, no.
And he said, I have a watch. And he went up to his bedroom and he came downstairs and he handed me an Omega Seamaster that he had bought on a cruise somewhere or whatever. And I wound that little thing up and I put it to my ear and I heard that ticking and I fell in love. And I thought I was the only person on earth who loved this tiny little machine that, is literally the size of a quarter, and it keeps time within a few seconds a day. Maybe some years later, I was in Newport, Rhode Island for a long weekend, and I found in a newsstand, I found a magazine called Orologi da Polso, which was an Italian watch magazine. And I looked at the thing on the newsstand and I couldn't buy it any faster than I did. And I took it home and I couldn't believe that there were other people that were obsessed with watches. And, it kind of started with that. From there, I found, once the internet started and I had AOL dial-up, I found a forum called Time Zone. And on Time Zone, there were people like me who loved watches and wanted to discuss them. And that was kind of my start in the industry, so to speak. It was just a bunch of us geeks that a bunch of us are still around. Michael Sandler works for the 1916 company. William Messina has his own brand now. Peter Chong has Deployant. We're still around. And that was the hot place to talk about watches for a long time, kind of until the social media thing started and people didn't want to read paragraphs. They wanted a 60-second TikTok clip to watch instead. So yeah, I've been around for a while. I'm still fascinated by the product. I still can't believe that people pay me every day to play with watches. It's the best thing that could have happened to me.
First of all, congratulations on taking your hobby and turning it into a career and lasting as long as you have. I have a similar kind of situation where I made it, into a job, and next year it'll be 20 years for me. I know you're doing a little bit longer. But I think what's important is that our respective generations have seen an evolution, but have also seen the things that maintain, right? Like there's been a lot of evolution in the types of media that people like. I have personally tried to keep up. When I first started, forums like Time Zone were the kind of dominant species of media. I introduced the blog style format, which I think was preferable. Early on in 2010, I did the first watch podcast. I had been doing video early on. I'm even doing video again now. So it's, there's certain things that change, but there's also certain things that remain. I wanted to sort of ask, in going to those early meetups and things like that, what has really just remained the same? 25 years ago, if someone was at a watch meetup group compared to one like we were at over the weekend, what has fundamentally remained exactly the same in that period of time? And then maybe what has changed?
Well, what's remained the same is the enthusiasts' love of the product. And I don't care what it is. I'm wearing a Swatch today. It doesn't matter what it is. The enthusiast love for the product hasn't changed. What has changed is how we interact with that product. Back then, I think my first meetup, I don't think any of us had cell phones. I know none of us had cell phones. So, there was no taking pictures. There was no posting it on Instagram. There was no Facebook. There was none of that. It was just a bunch of watch geeks who got in front of a tray of toys because the brand bought them dinner and fell in love with a new product they'd never seen before. So that's changed. I did an event yesterday with a retailer in California. And by the time I got on the plane the next day, you go on Instagram and there's 100 pictures of the watches that were at the event, and everybody's all excited about showing off what they saw. So it's a different world today. It's much more reactive, but we're still a bunch of watch geeks who love the product.
The world of events and retail has merged. I think for me, that's a big difference. As you said, at first it was, we're meeting up ourselves. Maybe there's a brand involved with it. Expectations are low. It's like, let's just sort of hang out and talk about these things. Today, in-person events, at least in the United States, are celebrated because of their commercial opportunity. You have everything from wind-up style events where people go there to buy relatively affordable timepieces right there, to events like the Collective one that we were at that sells maybe a sort of higher price point. Maybe it's available right then. Maybe you put in an order. But this idea that people have a social experience divorced from a commercial experience is kind of going away. The idea that people will just sort of get excited at an event and then at some later experience walk into a retailer, try to form another relationship. It seems almost like too much work these days. Talk a little bit about how important and how effective this sort of blending of events and retail is. And for you, what you think the future in it is.
Well, it's interesting. When we started the subsidiary for Czapek this year, one of the things that Xavier, our CEO, said to me was, you need to get out and do collectors events. You really need to. You've been concentrating on building a retail network and all of that, but we've got to be busy finding new collectors and meeting the people who either have already bought our watch or will potentially buy our watch. I delivered 2 big pieces in person this month of June. It's only June 8th. And there's something about, getting in the car, getting on an airplane, going and visit somebody, shaking their hands and delivering their watch versus, putting in a FedEx box and it shows up. I think it makes a much bigger statement. I will say that Czapek does sell direct as well as through the retail network. So that's why I was able to deliver a couple of pieces. My customers, I always tell them, look, you're the customer. You tell me where you want to buy. If you want to buy from a retailer, I'll give you a list of them. I'll give you phone numbers. Call them up and see what they have, what they can get. If you would rather deal direct with the brand, you're welcome to do that. We will work either way. And that has changed a lot. That's changed a lot. It was only maybe within the last 10 years that there was any way to buy a watch that wasn't from a retailer. Now, almost every brand has their own mono-brand boutiques, whether that's working for them or not. Now they have the $1 million rent on Madison Avenue, and do they see it as an advertising expense, or do they see it as a viable way to sell their product? And then the waiting lists that some brands have, that changes things a lot too.
I think what's interesting to me is that, especially right now, there's a whole lot of brands, dozens really, who essentially have to go to these events to really make a sales impact. They don't have stores. They don't have a lot of retailers or any retailers. And the alternative is their website, which as a .com is not exactly like a machine to make money. You still have to get people there and wanting your product once they do get there. And usually these websites are essentially shoppable catalogs, as I call them. They don't really do a lot of convincing. There's no video of someone like you, Mike, saying here's why this brand is cool. It's like, if you don't already know what you're looking for, we're not really going to help you. So what I've noticed is a lot of brands, even very big, powerful ones, essentially have this strategy where by going to events, whether it's a collector's event or maybe a lifestyle event that's not related to watches like cars or some type of thing like that, their plan is to sell sort of one-on-one in person through these relationships. And I see more and more brands adopting this because like you said, having your own store is expensive and it's difficult to have relationships with these retailers. I don't know how sustainable it is, but just, do you notice that more and more brands have this strategy, and how sustainable is it to have basically all of your commercial activity be somewhat spontaneous at these in-person events?
I mean, it depends on the brand, whether they're selling through a retail network or whether they're only selling direct or a combination thereof. You take a company like Rolex, for example, they do not have, as far as I know, any company-owned boutiques.
Just the one in Geneva. Just the one in Geneva.
Okay, there's one in Geneva. So when you walk into South Coast Plaza and there's a Rolex boutique, that boutique is not owned by Rolex. It's owned by a Rolex retailer.
It's just controlled by Rolex.
Well, that's a whole other story. We're not going to. Well, maybe we won't go there. But yeah, the collectors events are definitely a great way to market. It brings people to the table who have maybe never seen your product. You may only get 5 minutes with them, but at least you're able to make some sort of a dent in their idea about what you are and what you have, because they finally get to see the watch. And especially for the small brands who make, whatever, let's say 4 figures or less watches a year, they aren't going to have a lot of opportunity to see the watch. So those events, I think, are very important. Is it important to get your watch out on social media? Sure it is. But how many people are going to buy a 5-figure, 6-figure watch without actually holding it in their hands? Probably not too many.
I noticed something over the last couple of years that's been kind of funny. And this is, I guess, not always in my favor to say this as an internet website owner, but I found that the saturation of watch information marketing online is so high that unless you are spending ongoingly and have a good strategy, oftentimes it's easier for a customer to initially learn about you in the real world, right? It used to be like, oh, real world advertising is hard. Get them online. It's easier. It's faster. They're right there. And that was true for a long time. And don't get me wrong, abandoning internet marketing would be a terrible idea. But for a lot of brands who are not able to compete in that environment, meeting someone who's a customer where they might be in the real world is more effective than the relatively anemic strategies and budgets online. So ironically, while that customer might then go back on the internet to do research, the initial discovery for a lot of these luxury products, including high-end timepieces, now is more likely to happen in the real world than maybe online, given how competitive and saturated these platforms are with similar messaging. Do you agree, disagree?
I completely agree. And the other thing is, it's hard to trust what you read online.
Tell me more.
It's hard. Well, the website you're reading, what's their game, right? Are they selling watches?
We're just nerds.
No, I understand that, but yes, you're right. But there are a lot of websites who pretend to be journalists, and at the same time, they're selling watches. And
I mean those guys? That's not us, though. You agree, right? That's not us.
That is not aBlogtoWatch, and it never has been. You guys, I don't think have ever, maybe your book, but you don't sell product. But it's hard, and they say, oh no, our editorial side is completely different from the sales side, and you still wonder that. I'll just hold this up. This thing that they just reviewed and they told you was absolutely amazing, and then you flip the page and you see they're selling this thing. And how much can I trust their review?
You can't at all.
I mean, maybe in some cases you can, but you have to wonder. And I think I don't know, even as a sales guy, I hate to be sold. Tell me the truth. Let me make my own decision, and I'll decide whether your product is right for me or not.
I'm going to make an observation, Mike. And again, as a media person, this has sort of been made clear to me over the years of what I do. Now, there is this thing called a product review. You and I grew up with it. We read it in magazines. We know what a product review is. It has a specific meaning for us. And when someone reviews something, it's not the person selling it or the person making it. We know that. right? And for years and years, blank review, like insert product name or product type review, has been a very popular thing for the internet. People want to buy things, but they also want to hear experts' thought about it. Eventually, a retailer realized, wait a minute, I can just write an article that says watch review. Nobody seems to care because there's no police on the internet. Yes, a consumer might dismiss it, but as far as the search engine is concerned, this is a watch review without, looking at other factors. So because there's this ability to use language in any way you want, marketing has sort of taken over what a watch review is. It's contingent on a consumer to look at that piece of content, look at the context, ask themselves, who is this? What is around here? To say, is this actually a watch review or not? Because that thing that we grew up with, a review, we're I don't want to say we're dinosaurs, but the internet has morphed the meaning of terms that have had actual meaning to us in the past. Review these days is about as meaningful as the word natural. It means nothing as used.
Yeah, and it's hard because, I just bought a new air conditioner. We live in an old house, and a really old house.
I've heard stories.
I bought a new air conditioner for downstairs. And, you go to homedepot.com and there's 20 different brands. And so what do? You go read reviews on what's the best 18,000 BTU air conditioner. And you have to look at every review with a very careful eye to see who is writing this. Did they actually review them, or are they regurgitating a press release? Is there a link to buy the thing on Amazon where they get a couple of points? Who's writing this? And you have to be careful. Not everything you read is going to be unbiased.
The caveat emptor, otherwise known as buyer beware, is a concept that I've known for a long time. I learned about it early on in law school, and I continue to think about that. And it's various degrees, right? In certain marketplaces, the marketplace protects the consumer. There's regulations that say you can do this, you can't do this. There's sort of less buyer beware. Maybe you go to a supermarket, you don't have to worry too much. There's a lot of checks. But in a lot of other instances, especially when it comes to a luxury product, it's a jungle, and there's traps. And there's things you can do wrong, and there's predators out there, but there's also some nice folks. And, you can't trust a review, a price, a retailer at face value anymore. You have to do a lot of research. I try to talk about that as being a problematic fragmentation of the market, where there's too many bad options to buy a watch as well as the good options. But we're sort of talking about the same thing, that as the person buying the watch, no one's going to hold your hand and say, sir or ma'am, I'm going to protect you in this process. You have to educate yourself on not just what these things are and how to talk about them, but also how to acquire them in a safe way. That's tough.
For sure it is. I remember the first time I bought a watch over the internet. I had the hots for a Panerai back when Panerai was on fire and you couldn't get it. And I decided which model I wanted for my first Panerai. And I started, there was websites and email. This was in the year 2000. And I sent an email out to every Panerai dealer in the world saying, do you have, I think it was a 117 or something like that. Do you have this watch? Do you have this watch? Most of them ignored me. Most of them who didn't ignore me said no. And then I got an email from a guy in Venezuela.
Ooh.
Who said to me, I have the watch. I was like, really? Yeah, I have the watch. He sent me a picture. I'm sure it was some kind, I don't know, probably put it on his scanner and sent it to me. And I wired the guy money, right? And I told my wife that night at dinner, I'm like, I just sent $3,000 to Venezuela, and I don't know if I'm ever going to see that watch. And if I don't see that watch, there's absolutely nothing I can do about it. And the watch did show up. He was a reputable, authorized retailer.
Oh, lucky you.
Yeah. And I still have that watch, but there's a lot of shenanigans that happen out there. You read the stories about vintage Rolexes with fake dials and fake websites and phishing schemes. And boy, what is it? A fool and his money are soon parted, right?
In your experience, how dangerous is it out there? And here's what I'm getting at. I want to know what the average watch consumer is willing to take in order to maintain their interest in the hobby? Like, how much can they be abused, scammed, cheated, whatever, before they fundamentally exit the hobby? And I know this is a larger question, but I think that a lot of customers are abused, especially early on, where they might get scammed or they overspend on things. And what I worry about, Mike, is them being turned off to the hobby altogether, right? If you buy a watch and the goal is to make yourself feel good, and you do that a few times and it does not make you feel good, logically, you're going to find another hobby. So I'm trying to figure out, in your opinion, what the threshold for abuse is amongst your average luxury watch buyer.
Oh boy, I don't know how to answer that. Some of us just keep going back and buying more watches because we love them. You know.
But you agree it's an important question.
Of course it is. Does a physical product make us feel happy? I mean, yes. Is that okay? You know, I just ordered a special fountain pen from Japan, and it's not going to come in for a year, and I'm super excited because a year from now I'm going to have another really cool fountain pen. Are there times when that thing shows up in FedEx and we open the box and go, it wasn't as nice as I thought it was going to be? Sure, there are. And, you know, I guess that's where the secondary market thrives, because we wear that thing for a week and we go, yeah, I really don't like it as much as I did. And I think that's a big part about seeing the watch in person, seeing the product in person, holding that pen in your hands and going, yeah, I like this. I want this. But ultimately, I don't think we get our self-worth out of the things that we surround ourselves with. I hope not.
Well, I guess I point to the straight fact that this is a hobby, which implies its recreational value. And a hobby is supposed to make you feel distracted, pleasant, good. What I'm saying is it's not a tool that we need to buy. The entire process of being into watches has to bring joy. But if we are routinely feeling that we're paying too much, or that the watches aren't bringing us the base level satisfaction we expect, we just look to spend our money on other things that bring us joy.
Sure. And let's be honest, none of us needs a wristwatch. Where I'm sitting right now, 1, 2, 3, I see 4 sources of time with barely turning my head. None of us needs to have, by the way, this is a Swatch 39 that I'm wearing today. I wore
like
it just
that
because
square one.
I knew we were going to talk about tariffs, and this one has the 9 and the 3 backwards.
Oh, that's that one.
For when Trump put in the 39% tariffs. I knew we were going to talk about that. Anyway, I've got 4 or 5 sources of time without turning my head. None of us needs a wristwatch, but we get a joy out of it that most people don't understand. That's why they call us idiot savants or watch nerds or whatever. But there's just so much joy that comes from, it doesn't have to be $100,000 watch. It can be a $100 watch. And there's still joy in that. And, do I get more joy out of a $50,000 watch than I do out of a $50 watch? I don't know. Sometimes, yes. Sometimes maybe not. And, but yeah, I mean, as consumers, sometimes the transaction goes the way we would hope it would, and sometimes it doesn't.
I'm going to change tack for a moment here. Where do you recommend, or where would you like consumers to offload their watches, right? There is a natural thing that happens. People buy a watch. It's not that it's bad watch. They just find themselves not wearing it that much. And most of the time, they're not looking to get money. They're actually just looking to get a different watch. There's so many ways of doing this. Where do you think are some of the healthiest ways in terms of the market as well as consumer happiness to take a watch you no longer want, trade it, sell it, whatever? Again, you've done this a long time, but you also know what the market, should be supporting. Mm-hmm. Talk about that a little bit.
So there's a very interesting question, one I've never been asked before, and I like it. There's 1,000 ways that you can sell a watch. You can put it on eBay. You can put it on Facebook Marketplace. You can put it on Chrono24. There's a lot of different things you can do. All of those things have a risk involved. You risk somebody scamming you. They get the watch and they say it wasn't in there, and they go back to PayPal and say, this guy sent me an empty box, and PayPal sides with the buyer, not with the seller. So there's a lot of different ways that you could do it. I'll tell you what I've done. I don't sell a lot of watches, but I did just sell a personal watch of mine that I'd owned for a couple of years because I traded for a different one from the same brand. And you know what I did? I sent it to one of my retailers who I know deals in pre-owned pieces. And I said to him, sell this for me, keep whatever you need to keep, and send me the rest. And I never said to them, I know this watch is worth $20,000 and I don't want you to, you better give me 19.5 for it. I don't play those games. That's the way I've sold the last couple of watches that I've de-acquisitioned, shall we say. Or, you trade it into the retailer because you're buying a new one, something like that. Does the retailer need to make a few dollars on it? Yeah, of course he does. But I'm not in the buying and selling and trading game to make money. I'm buying a watch because I like it and I want it. And I always say I buy with my heart, not with my head. Because if I overanalyze things, it's going to make me crazy. And I'm not going to have the joy that I have buying a watch because I like it. And I bought it because I thought it would be a really fun watch to have in my collection. And if I get sick of it a few years later or I decide to trade it out for something else, I'm not that concerned if I make $500 or lose $500. It doesn't matter to me. Not because I don't care about the money, but because there's more important things.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. You chose to sort of focus on the expectation that a lot of consumers have right now that this is also a financial trading hobby as opposed to I'm buying nice stuff that makes me happy. And yes, it depreciates. And that's an interesting element. I mean, if you buy and sell watches long enough, you're not making money on most of them. And if you are trying to make money on most of them, you probably aren't buying watches you like. And so I think that's what's important is that if you're worried about losing money or hoping to make money, you're probably not going to be buying a watch that you want to wear on your wrist. And that changes the hobby into something else. And so what you should be doing is essentially focus on getting the watches that you want to wear. And when you offload them, unless you want to be a dealer yourself, it's worth a small amount of money. It's not that much to have someone sell it for you, right?
That's the way I feel. Again, they're in the watch business. Take my watch. Price it fairly, sell it, keep whatever you need to keep the lights on and pay the credit card fee that you have to pay when you sell it. And when you're done, send me the rest or leave it on account because I'm going to buy something else from you. I have a good friend. I hope he doesn't listen to this podcast, but if he does, that's okay. He's a finance guy. And so he's just obsessed with how much should I pay for this thing? What's my downside risk? Anytime they talk about downside risk, I'm like, you're talking to the wrong guy. Buy it because you love it. So he texted me a couple of weeks ago and he says to me, my local Rolex dealer has a vintage Paul Newman Daytona. And it's, I forget what it was, $125,000 or something like that. He says, do you think this is a good buy for me? Now, first off, I know nothing about vintage Rolex. And I said to him, I'm the wrong guy to ask. But I'll do a little snuffing out on the web for you. And I see that Paul Newman Daytonas are selling for like twice $125,000. So first thing I said to him was, it's too cheap. There's got to be a problem. And he sends me a picture, and it's not a Paul Newman. It is a vintage Daytona, 626 something or other. I don't remember now. But it wasn't a Paul Newman Daytona. So in that case, it should have been around 100, and the retailer was asking 125 or something like that. And he said to me, well, it came back from the Rolex Atelier, which evidently is Rolex's CPO for vintage pieces. And so I go on Chrono 24 and I see this exact watch. They're in the 70s, 80s, 90,000s. And I understand CPO is worth a lot, right? I understand that the Rolex dealer is going to make some money. The watch has been examined by Rolex, and they have certified it that it's not got, fake links in the bracelet and whatever. So I know that's worth something. But I said to him, if you're looking to buy this watch as an investment, I don't think you can spend $125 on it. take the risk, buy one of the $70,000, $80,000 ones, send it to one of the Rolex gurus like Eric Wind or somebody like that. Have them, have them say, yes, this is a good watch. It's got the right dial. It's not the wrong movement in it or whatever. And, then maybe you can make a few dollars. But I'm not in this for the money. When I buy a watch personally, I buy it because I like it and I want it. And if I lose a few 5 years down the road, I lose a few 5 years down the road. I'm okay with that. But I don't understand my clients who call me and say, well, what's the secondary market on this? I'm like, I don't know. I kind of know because I do know, but they need to go to Chrono24 or eBay or something like that and see what those watches are selling for on the secondary market. And if you're buying the watch because you think you're going to make money on it, you're probably wrong. It's the rare piece. If you can buy a 57 or a 6711, if you can buy it at retail, sure, you'll make some money on that. But you'll never buy another one because once the retailer knows you sold that watch, he's never going to sell you another one. He can't afford to. I have a friend who has a Rolex boutique. He's the owner of a Rolex boutique.
Okay.
And Rolex vets his customers on some of the big pieces, like the Le Mans watch, which is kind of the new Daytona, new Paul Newman Daytona. They approve who gets that watch because they know that the retail on that watch is, I don't know what it is. Let's say it's 50, 60, 70,000, and they're selling for 250 on the secondary market. So they want to sell that watch to somebody who doesn't care that he can make $100,000 or $150,000 flipping that watch. That's not why he's buying the watch. Yeah. And, buy with your heart, not with your head. That's my advice.
This is a great place to end. Some of the wisdom I sort of think that people should take from this is find your watch expert, get to know your watch expert, trust your watch expert. Mike, where can people learn more about you and the brands that you carry on the internet?
Well, they can go to Czapek.com, CZAPEK. They can go to SingerReimagined.com. And my website is called horologyworks.com, but that'll just link you to those two other websites. My website's pretty boring because it's just meant to be a place to hold my email address. So that's where you can find me. I'm more than happy to help anybody. Ariel, I want to thank you for two things before we end. First, maybe three things. First thing I want to thank you for is your integrity of how you are a watch journalist. It's very different from how many people are watch journalists. I want to thank you for your friendship over the years. And I want to thank you for having me on the the podcast and the YouTube channel. This has been really fun. It's been fun because when I saw you yesterday, I said, do we have an agenda? Do you have questions you want me to answer? And you said to me, no, we're just gonna talk like two old buddies. And this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate that we've wandered around and had a nice chat.
That's very kind of you, Mike, and we'll have to have you back. This has been the Superlative podcast interview with Mike Margolis. Mike, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.